Okay, hello everyone. Okay, so I know we're a little bit late starting, but we'll just wait a couple minutes if anybody else will join in here. We do have our meeting being recorded as well. So if you are comfortable turning on your camera and speaking through the microphone, that's great. We welcome that. If not, you're more than welcome to keep your cameras turned off and use any of the chat functions. And yeah, we've got you'll see Richard is joining us. He is having some camera difficulties, so you might see his face pop in and out throughout the presentation. But that's okay. You'll still you'll hear him go through the presentation as the audio is working good that way. Yeah, we'll wait maybe a couple more minutes here.
Yeah, apologies for my camera issues. I mean, you were looking at the slides, not having to look at me when we start. So, but yeah, apologies. Not quite sure why I've got such a glitch here. But nice to meet you guys this evening, and thank you very much, Avery, for the invitation.
Yeah, anytime. This is great. It's exciting. It's always good to have not only the contributions from coaches within Canada and North America, but also to get that international perspective and educator perspective as well. So we do welcome you, Richard. So we will just let other people as they join roll in, but we will get this webinar started. So yeah, officially welcome Richard. Richard is going to be doing a talk on unconscious bias for us, and I will just send it over to Richard to introduce himself and tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, thank you very much, and good evening. I've got Kayla, Rachel, Shun, and Tyler. So thank you very much for joining this evening. I'll give you a little bit of my background in a minute, and then we'll take this session to sort of 50 minutes. Then we'll have some questions and answers in the last 10. But the idea is these webinars work often when it's a sort of platform for discussion. So feel free to join it as a dialogue rather than like a one-way presentation. If I give a little bit of my background, so I've done some work with GB Wheelchair Rugby on their coach development, which is during COVID. So we were used to that kind of webinar basis. I work at the University of Winchester where I lecture in sports coaching. I'm also a coach developer across a number of different sports, from cycling, where I work for British Cycling, and England Rugby. So those are two of the main groups I work with. And I suppose by being a teacher of over 30 years and a coach for 20 years, the reason I'm sort of really pleased that Avery's put this on the agenda is I think by coaching we are sometimes naturally drawn to decisions that are not always the best, but also how can we just review our approach to our coaching. So feel free to ask any questions, and we'll make a start this evening. And thank you again. Now I'm not quite sure, and Avery, you might be able to tell me this one. Do you actually get Revels in Canada? Do you get this as a sweet? I'm not quite sure. But anyway, Revels are just some sweets that we can buy over here in packets. And the reason I've got started this slide is that when you look at it, you never really know what's on the inside, which is a little bit of an analogy for how I think we often make decisions based upon very limited information. I'm not saying that those in the group tonight, it's often there's people I coach with, those participants will make decisions. And so it's really about understanding who is in front of us, and that often is scratching down below the surface, reflecting upon experiences, making observations, rather than making decisions almost straight away, which is, part of our nature. So I use this slide today in one of my coaching workshops. And I suppose the reason I wanted to show this is because really when we have a bias, it's sometimes it's the opportunity to see things from somebody else's perspective. Neither of the people in the slide you can see here are wrong. They're just coming at the same platform from a different angle. And I think that's quite a good analogy for how we coach. We see the same scenario played out where we make our decisions and observations. Sometimes are based upon where we stand or how we view things. So this is really the kind of nature of the presentation tonight, and I wanted to involve everybody this evening in bringing your experiences to play from a coaching and also from a participant perspective. So I'm going to, before I kind of go on, if you would just be able to, I'll explain this picture in a minute. This is another example. If you can kind of introduce yourself and let me know that the age group you teach, if you're still participating and you're coaching. So if you'd be happy to unmic, that would be great to give me some idea of your experiences before I continue. And if you've got any particular questions that you'd like to start with. So would Kayla, would you like to just give me a little bit of your background very, very briefly? And good afternoon to you, good evening here.
Good morning. It's actually the morning here. I'm on the west coast of BC in
Okay.
Canada. So yeah, very first 9 o'clock a.m. I'm a strength and conditioning coach with the Paralympic Alpine team, and have been for the last 8 years, and do a little bit of their IST leading as well. And honestly, I'm just excited to hear what you have to say and to learn a little bit more about this and kind of see how it may relate, or how I can look at what I do a little bit differently every day with regards to the athletes.
Thank you, Kayla. It's nice to meet you, and appreciate you joining us this evening. Thank you. And what I'll try and do to all four of you is make sure that we can bring this to your environment. So as Kayla says, what you can learn, but it's very much about your setting and take that to be where you are. So thank you. And Rachel, would you like to just share with us? You have to share your screen because I know mine's flitting on and off tonight.
Oh, that's okay. Hi, everyone.
Okay. Hi, Rachel.
Hi, nice to meet you all. Mine's a bit of a strange one. I'm also in Vancouver, Canada. Mine's a bit of a strange one. I actually work for PADS, which is the Pacific Assistant Dog Society. So we work with people with disabilities, specifically mobility, and train them with a service dog. So our one of our board of directors mentioned this talk, and I just thought it would be really kind of interesting to see how maybe that would sort of intersect with what we do at PADS.
Yeah, thank you, Rachel. I will share with you a very interesting. Well, I found it interesting. Where it was about perspective when you're working with dogs. It was a video that was done on the London Underground where they put a camera on a guide dog,
Oh.
and it was to show people the perspective the dog had when working with its client, because people were moving out of the way of the person, the
Richard, I think your sound might have cut off here. Is that kind of the same for everybody, or am I freezing?
No, yeah.
Okay,
Same
okay.
for
Okay, good. I was a little bit worried.
I thought it was me too, but I think
Okay, that's good because I was like, I wasn't too sure if everyone was like frozen too, because everyone stayed pretty still on the screen. Okay, I will send him a quick note. I was so engaged in the story. I was like, I'm ready to hear about the about what he was going to say.
Yeah, me too. I was like, oh, and then it just kind of cut off. I was like, oh no.
Oh, I wonder if he'll rejoin us, probably. Tyler, you just joined us. I'll quickly just let you know. Richard just had to leave and come back. There we go. He froze up for a second, but we'll continue on. Go for it.
Yeah. Sorry, Rachel. I was just talking about you know, what your particular role, and it was the camera that was on the placed on the dog, the GoPro that was placed on the dog. That was very interesting, where people saw the work of the dog from his perspective, which
really
gave a little bit
cool.
more empathy towards the blind person and the dog. So it was interesting. So hopefully there's something we can touch upon in your work. So thank you for that, and apologies for flitting out for a minute.
Oh, no worries. Thank you for the story. It was really interesting.
Okay, I actually used it, interestingly, without going off topic, I used it on myself, and I put it on my daughter when she was learning to ride a bike, and I saw myself being incredibly impatient, because I didn't see the world from her eyes, didn't see how big the cars and the hazards in the road were. So it's quite interesting, using it from that perspective. So thank you. And Tyler, would you like welcome today, and would you like to give us some background as well?
Sure. Thanks, Richard. Thanks for hosting this session. As well, like Rachel and Kayla, I'm on the west coast of Canada, so based in Victoria. I work for Sport for Life, which is a national multi-sport service organization. So we work with the NSOs on their athlete development pathways and other aspects. And I'm joining today because we're in the process of updating. We have this resource that's 15-ish years old, maybe more, called No Accidental Champions. Excuse me, and it was meant to be a supplement that focused on the disability space, but it's quite dated. And so we're doing a new version of that is much more current, modern, captures many more perspectives, considerations. And so, yeah, I felt like this session today would be relevant and something that we want to for sure incorporate into that material. So again, appreciate you putting this on and having me today.
Thank you, Tyler, and thanks for joining us today. Thank you. And then, Shun, would you like to just introduce yourself as well?
Yep, I'm Shun. I live in BC, Vancouver as well. I'm originally from Japan, and I'm coaching men's artistic gymnastics. I'm in advanced coaching diploma program. Then my mentor Court invited me because this is a great session. So I'm very excited to learn.
Thank you. So there's immediately you've educated me to the world of men's artistic gymnastics, which I didn't know it existed. So thank you for that. That's I appreciate you being with us tonight. So thank you. And Kurt, thank you very much. And Kurt, welcome.
Thanks, Richard, for hosting. Yeah, as well. My name's Kurt Innes. I'm also based on the west coast of BC. I'm currently in a coaching consulting role, working with the CSI Ontario through their advanced coaching diploma, and also coach educator out here on the west coast, doing several NCCP facilitation courses, and also a lifetime cycling coach as well, Richard. So I'm really curious for your perspectives. Thank you.
Yeah, well, anything I can share, and this is to all of you guys as well. If there's anything you want to reach out to me further beyond this, please don't hesitate. Avery's got my email address, and if there's resources or things that I can share with you, of course. So Kurt, you may be interested in some of the cycling work I'm doing with one of the teams in Europe at the moment. But if I can help any of you guys beyond the workshop, please don't hesitate. I'm more than happy to do that. So yeah, so thank you for that. And this slide here, which is we start back. So again, maybe Kurt will look at this, for example, from a cycling perspective. I gave this picture to a group of cycling commissaires, effectively their race officials and referees, and the question, what did you see that's wrong? Now, within a race, the cyclist is not allowed to gain any aerodynamic advantage from any of the race vehicles. And this picture seems to display this rider is seeking to gain advantage by getting back into the race, maybe from a puncture or from a natural break, or maybe needing to gain time back from losing on the climb. And I wondered how they would view this picture. And because the untrained eye would say, well, of course, this rider's taking advantage. But straight away, one thing they noticed was that the rider doesn't have a race number. So he was actually using it to training, because you can do what's called overspeed training on a motor pace. I'm sure Kurt may be familiar with this as a training activity. And what it made me realize is how quickly we are to make decisions. And I think from your background to all of you is being the recipient of decisions. The example being artistic gymnastics, immediately I think, well, I didn't know about that. And I'm only viewing artistic gymnastics from a female participation perspective. So it's actually encouraging us to think more broadly about where we may instantly make a decision. So here's an example that I use again. This is called the astronaut test. On the left-hand side is Britain's sort of most famous, I suppose, astronaut, Captain Tim Peake. But on the right-hand side is Helen Sharman. And I went to school with Helen, and Helen is actually Britain's first astronaut. She went up in the late 1980s on the Russian space program at the time. And I'm going to give you some kind of examples where if you asked people about a picture and you ask people about the perception of something, we are very much already drawn to our lived experiences rather than taking the time to think a bit deeper about things. So our role, I believe, as a coach is to make decisions where we are as informed as possible, to avoid us making a decision based upon on assumption. So I suppose this is really an example. It's the brain making judgments and decisions quickly. And we know that our first impressions of people, our first impressions of an experience can already be formed. And as coaches, one of the things that we may discuss is how we think about changing someone's view of somebody that we coach, or allowing us time before we make a decision about the athletes that we work with, particularly if they're new. So here's an example, and if you want to, ask any questions or bring that to your context, then please do. So look at the first one, decision making, and we'll take away the word captain and maybe put leader in there. So decision making, what led you to choose your captain? Did age, background influence your choice? And did some profiles feel more like leaders or playmakers? So has anybody kind of been on the wrong end, if you like, of someone making a decision about their sport or them as an athlete? So if you have any examples from your coaching world, I mean, I'm just thinking, for example, with Kayla, I often think that athleticism and weights and measurable performances within sport will often give us that bias already. So we look at the measurables before we look at the non-measurables. When I look at decisions in terms of who we choose to captain or lead a group, I did some work in professional rugby in the UK, just finished the third project on female captaincy in rugby. And the choice of captain or leader was very much based upon someone's competencies. so the best player was often chosen as the captain. It was an easy decision to make. People didn't take time to think about the broader personality traits that we were required to lead. And they looked at, did age influence that? In other words, the lived experience was something that was valued by those coaches choosing captains or leaders. The background influence, in other words, what was their experience of choosing a captain or when they became captain? Or were there some intuitive feel about an individual that thought, actually, I'm going to use my intuition that gives me that sixth sense of somebody being a good leader. And this is where we look at allowing time for us to make a decision. So I think that a bias can be drawn upon, I said, the measurables, that's times, weights, speeds, or the non-measurable, which is more behaviors. So are we looking at our bias when we look at someone as someone we're going to choose to be in our team or someone we coach? What message are they sending to you that allows you to have a better decision or better view on somebody? And I've got to the next one is about assumptions. So did you make assumptions about confidence or tactical intelligence, personality descriptions, or which athletes did you connect with the most and why? So all of these 6 points can influence our choice. And this is just one aspect. And I've got here captaincy. In my case in rugby, but it can be in any sport context and leadership. What makes us make decisions? How do we use our assumptions? How do we overcome assumptions that are very almost immediate? And then we've got coaching behavior. So this is us, how we lead and how we coach. Now, those involved in coach development, how can you encourage your coaches to think differently about what might be an immediate decision? So how might unconscious bias show us during a real coaching session? How do we distribute playing time? How often do you give feedback? Who you give feedback to? Expectations, leaders, and patience with mistakes. So what I've been very conscious of when I design activity time, I don't set a structure in terms of minute by minute structure when I do a coaching session, because I want to distribute playing time around what the environment is giving me. So I'm very intuitive and very agile, where I am able to make decisions based upon the information I'm seeing in front of me, rather than sticking to my structure. It doesn't mean I change my intention or my goal, but I allow the information that comes back from the environment to guide me through my coaching process. Now, this is an interesting thing about feedback, and I've been working at recently, not just today, how often you give feedback, who you give feedback to, and the type of feedback. So when I've said to the people I coach, I said, how do you want me to give you feedback? It's to try and take away the bias I have in terms of what I believe is the most appropriate feedback, but also be conscious about those who I give feedback to. And when we think about or reflect on all the participants, we always want authentic feedback. We want it to be told exactly what is happening, but it's the nature of it. So some people will want very concise, some want it to be given feedback away from others. So I always think about, does our experience as an athlete influence how we coach? Are we biased towards our experiences, or are we much more open to the individual nature of those we coach? what would be the best thing for that particular individual? Okay, so I put 4 pillars of the nature of unconscious bias. And I've given you the example of the 2 astronauts from the UK, and I've given you a picture as well, where involuntary, what this means is we don't actually think, it becomes an automated response, an automated decision, an automated choice, rather than one that's thought through. The heavy influence of social media, we know that the algorithms that are now we become exposed to as we start to search for particular things, those things will become much more prevalent in our feeds. So we kind of start to get fed a particular type of image or story. Our past experiences are extremely significant on how we view something. So it could be the experience of a particular sport we had at school, a particular environment, or a particular place we go to. We're often drawn to thinking, okay, so I mean, I've been to Tofino. I went to Vancouver Island. It must have been about 7 or 8 years ago. I had a wonderful experience. I'd go back. My views are already formed based upon my experience. And also the other point is about the influence of others. Are we able to think independently, or in a group of coaches or participants, athletes, do we all tend to think the same because we are driven by that group think? So I used some activities about 2 weeks ago with a group. They're all given the same equipment to solve a problem, and they all came up with 4 different solutions. They worked very independently. And we came up with this well-worn phrase, which is, if everybody in the room is thinking the same, then no one's thinking. And I think that's very much around allowing people to become not necessarily rule breakers or mavericks, but given the space that when they come up with a different idea, that they will be heard, and the consequences of thinking something different is embraced rather than kind of marginalized. So that influence of others, that group thing, can be positive to get everybody to think, at appropriate times I think the same, but also we want to be able to think, allow that space to have our views, not to be biased by those around us. Okay, so the 2 images here are particularly, I've just explained why I've chosen these 2. And this was in the past a breakout activity, but we can do it together. And so what I've got is an orchid and a cactus. And the purpose behind those 2 images was really to indicate that we will all thrive in different circumstances. So in other words, people need particular conditions to thrive, and other ones will thrive whatever the conditions. So it's kind of what environment we create. So I've got 5 examples. If we accept there's unconscious bias in coaching, how could you modify your approach, behaviors towards a situation, a player, or another team? So these 5 themes are selection, how we choose and select and deselect individuals, our interactions with others, our expectations of others, the opportunities we provide, and also the equality. So when it comes to selection, I always think the selection is an example of sports. And it's not just about picking a team, it's about selecting those we work with, those we offer jobs to, and those we deselect. So we'll have a bias based upon our experiences of them. You may be biased to where they've come from geographically, to where they studied, to who they've been coached under. So when we select a team, do we have a really broad basis on which we make that decision? I think the difference between talent and potential. We have talent identification, I'm sure, in both Canada and in the United Kingdom. But I always like to use the word potential. Can we see the potential in somebody over necessarily the immediate talent? There's a lovely video which talks about a shouting talent and a whispering talent. And the shouting talent is where people are clearly exceptional at what they do. They clearly have that talent. And the whispering talent is what you might call a slow burn, when somebody is gradually developing, gradually changing, gradually improving. But we'll get to that real high performance or that skill level later. Interactions. This is really important. One of the things I use in terms of my coaching education is I talk about connection before content. So I always like to connect with those I teach before I teach them the subject. Knowledge of the subject is not that binds that relationship stronger than actually having an interaction and understanding of those people we're with. So taking time to, we have disability sport, we have those working with, as mentioned, across the spectrum of S&C and disability sport and artistic gymnastics, for example, and cycling. This interaction, this understanding of the individual is a great way of being informed. So I always, use this phrase, which was, I never knew. And then he said, well, you never asked. And what I find in that was by taking time to ask about people, we actually have a picture of those in front of us, which is much clearer than the one we start with. Whereas if we lead with the content of what we're trying to deliver, we're often not meeting the needs of those in front of us because we are thinking that I'm going to deliver this, when actually, if you are much more open-minded and don't bias your lens around delivering what you think is appropriate, you're much more informed. And I can give you an interesting example, which I think has helped me shape my coaching approach. And it sounds a strange question to ask. I'm not sure this is for every environment, but if ever I do a group work with a new group of people in front of me when I coach in different settings for the first time, and I'm on a coach development or athlete development program, I'm always interested if people have tattoos. Now, it may sound a strange question, but people's tattoos are often part of their story. So when I ask them about them, I start to get an insight in terms of their background, what's important to them, what they're that peeling away of the outer layer is a simple questioning of what story are they telling me, what's important to them, and you'll get almost a much better story of that person, which strengthens that interaction, because you're not asking the very simple basic questions, which I did obviously with you guys tonight about your backgrounds, but it actually builds a picture of that person. And then we go on to expectations. That's also thinking, right, well, not everybody in the room wants to achieve the same goals. Now I've spoken to people, understood them, the expectations of this are different. Sometimes people simply want to join groups to become, to make friends for more of a social element. Some want to become high performance. Some have very, very particular goals that are meaningful to them. Revisiting an event they didn't succeed at in the past, or an event that they've always dreamt of doing. And that enables you then to shape your interaction, shape your approach, your design of programs with them around what they want from you. So, I think what we've got here is just an opportunity to be informed And the more informed we are, the less we are biased around our assumptions of people, why they're there, what they want to do, and what they're capable of doing. Opportunity and equality, the embracing of everybody in our sessions, the inclusion of everybody in our sessions is something where we want to just be mindful of the fact that we reach out to everybody. We give equal opportunities. I know you can talk about inclusion as being exactly that, equal opportunity, but if I think about a setting where you think, well, I'm not going to give the opportunity to that person, don't think they're capable of doing it, then that is sometimes where people make that assumption. So giving people those opportunities across the whole range of activities that you provide. And then I think also about the implications of unconscious bias. I worked with one of the Premiership rugby teams in their academy, and this is one of the better teams, and they were very aware of the implications of making a wrong decision based upon limited information. So we worked with people on field, and we made decisions around their performance on the field, but also their off field. What were they like outside of the playing environment? The example that's in this image here is a guy called Kevin Phillips. Now, I think it's up until 2 years ago, Kevin Phillips, the only English player to win the European Golden Shoe Award. So the Golden Shoe is awarded to the highest goal scorer in European football. And you can be an English player playing in Spain, a Spanish player playing in England. So it's open to simply the person who scores the most goals in their national leagues. Now Kevin Phillips was released by a team called Southampton at the age of 16 because he was regarded as being too small. So there's an example of someone making an assumption about a player based upon their physical height, not their athletic performance. And I'm not sure if this will resonate with Rachel in terms of strength and conditioning, where athleticism is such a critical part in performance over someone's physical attributes of height, weight, and size. Not always appreciate that. So this was our example. And I do remember reading a book called The 2-Second Advantage, which the first chapter talks about Wayne Gretzky, which I'm sure you are familiar with, this the great Canadian Hall of Fame. Potentially, I'm not quite sure if it's still standing, the greatest ice hockey player of all time, certainly when I was reading about it. His attributes, physical attributes, and didn't lend himself to being the successful player that he is. But it's about looking at potential over talent, behaviors over measurables, where we're making an assumption of what is a fit, what is the ideal person, and immediately removing people who are what we call outliers, those who are not in the norms of a height or a weight, but actually have attributes that fall outside of that. Expectations. Do I have to work harder to change your bias? From my teaching experience, I always, here's an example which I used for my students. When they asked for me to write a reference, I said, well, if you write a reference, you write your reference of yourself, and if I agree with it, I'll assign it. Now, I'm not being awkward on that. What I'm trying to say is that what I see of them is very often not what they see of themselves. And when we sit down and talk together, it's because I've seen things in them that they don't actually regard as their strengths. So it's not always a thing, well, I don't agree with you because I think that you are making an assumption you're better than I've actually seen. But when you spend time with people, time in environments, those behaviors over time will reinforce or change your vision and your bias for somebody. So you're given cues all the time. What are we looking for when we look at somebody? It can be anything from timekeeping to gratitude to resilience, determination, questioning. All of those things keep us informed and are sending messages to all the time about someone's desire to be best they can be, or change our view of somebody where we think, okay, well, I'm not really quite sure how driven they are. So we can actually become much more informed. And then I think if we look at the impact, its impact on how coaches perform the following: interactions with others. We are much more able to give feedback, discuss, choose appropriate challenges, understand that people may stay with the problem because it's the right activity for them, understand what resilience is. We value people, you know, thinking in a bias session, valuing them as participants, valuing them, the challenges they've overcome to be our sessions, their goals, and categorize and group people. So, you know, we've become able to say everybody in the room is here for this activity, but everyone in the room here has different motivations, different drives, here for different reasons. And then we can become that agile coach who works around those different drives of those people in our room, in that setting. And again, these are implications by not being more open-minded. It can affect selection, our expectations. We over expect, or we under expect the roles, giving people leadership roles, potential. I went to a conference once, and I remember the speaker saying, everybody in this room has talent. Talent is right in front of me. But it was around the fact that we've getting us to recognize that we've all got talent, we've all got potential, but we don't always take the time to realize that those in front of us have got those skills, because we've already made our minds upon who we want to direct our efforts towards. And from that, certainly in youth sport, if you make a decision early around somebody in their level of performance, those selection, non-selection can really take someone's confidence away. But everybody's got potential. I use the word stretch, and what I mean by that is that if you have a group of people in the room, the stretch of one person may not be the stretch of somebody else. So I was teaching juggling to a group of physiotherapists, 70 physiotherapists, and it was from an coaching intervention perspective. And I said to one of the physios, I said, "How are you getting on?" And she said, "Well, I'm marking myself 2 out of 10. I said, "Okay, well, how can we get you to 3? How can we get you to 3 out of 10? And the reason I mention that is because of the bottom 2 here about potential individual confidence. She was measuring her performance against the person in the room who could juggle, rather than her own individual performance. And when I changed the conversation to say, well, how can we get to 3? Immediately that stretch became something that she could reach, rather than measuring her performance against those who are much more competent. And I think those conversations, those individual conversations, where we realize that everyone has potential, but we just need to find a way to nurture that, rather than have a bias of can do, can't do. It really is the central point of some of the success I've had in coaching, is that people growth and development is at different times, overcoming different setbacks, and different levels of confidence that we can instill. A couple of things that I learned here, and the picture, the image of the player in the background is one that I worked with before. Past performance is no predictor of future performance. And I think that's really important, that we look at someone whose previous performance, a result or an outcome. Okay, therefore they must, it's again, it's part of selection, understandably. But I'm always more interested in past behaviors as being a predictor of future behaviors. In other words, results would change, but behaviors are harder to change. And so these are some of the influences that lead us to unconscious bias. I mentioned social media, friends, experiences, family, and culture. All of those are great influences, as we know, where that unconscious bias kind of grows, if you like. Culture, I don't necessarily mean national culture. I mean the culture of the sport is often something that we become of, that group think becomes part of it. And this was what I've just mentioned about past behavior is more often a predictor of future behavior. That's why I'm always interested in how someone behaves in a coaching setting as influencing my my decisions and my observations of them. I'm not biased by results. I'm interested in behaviors. This image here is take control of the unseen forces guiding your decisions. So what's really leading us to make a decision is that our intuition, our instinct, our informed knowledge, or are we making it from outside influences or those instinctive kind of go-to responses that we make? So we want to try and get to move from the system 1 to system 2, where fast thinking, those daily decisions, those very unconscious intuitive decisions, are automatic response, and where we very often make mistakes because we make assumptions. So when we think slower about something, we make complex decisions around how we design a program, what's best for our athletes, our participants, or those we work with. It sometimes is the accumulation of the information that we need to make the right decision. So it's conscious, it's thought through, and it requires effort. It requires that the effort is time, being informed, conversations. We're much more likely to get much more reliable decision and outcome at the end of that. So how can I encourage those I work with? How can I improve myself? And how can I create an environment where unconscious bias is removed? I mean, this webinar, where I work with Wheelchair Rugby Canada and GB Wheelchair Rugby in the past, has been very much around my experience of walking into a environment where I made an assumption that people had a very similar background. But as with all environments of athletes, participants, and people we're working with, there is no one the same in the room in front of us. That diversity of experience of learning and setbacks, for example, are the things that I'm interested in finding out. So experience is the greatest teacher, being open, learning, asking questions, listening to people. I always think that communication is critical. I remember listening to a podcast where a guy who was delivering workshops on how to improve public speaking were much more popular than how people could improve their listening skills. Take time, noticing. One of the coaching exercises I do is I ask students and coaches I work with just to watch an environment, watch a game, watch an activity. I don't tell them what to look for. I don't bias their lens. I say, tell me what you see. And I ask them to say, look, I'm not going to tell you what I want you to look for because I'm already biasing your lens. If I give you that blank canvas, just tell what you see. It's very interesting, the different things that we see around the same activity. Ask questions and again read, knowledge of particular background. If you're going to do something new, read about it, read as much information we can, so we go into a new environment, so new settings, new athletes, with that information already at hand. This I'm not going to play it because Brené Brown, this is a nice little clip of empathy versus sympathy. I'm not going to play it, I think, because sometimes the speed of these doesn't always work effectively over Teams calls. But if you have a look at it on YouTube, you can put this link up. The one thing that I loved about this video, empathy versus sympathy, is that empathy was described as their truth. And what I mean by that, and what's meant in the video, is that when somebody is telling you something that's important to them, or their fear of something, fear of learning, trying something new, it's not something that you can take lightly. Just because I might not regard that as being fearful, I've really got to appreciate that that person is finding it fearful, scary, challenging, whatever it is. And the empathy allows us to sit with them and sit alongside them as they go through that. Difference between empathy and sympathy. So it's really about their truth, which I quite liked as a kind of description. Okay, this is a bit of a dated photograph. My daughter's now about 8 years past that date. But the reason I put the BMX track on there, or a skate park, is because there's assumption until I went along about these as being kind of places where the kids hang out. But actually, it's a great place to watch children and adults learn without a coach. That environment where falling off and getting back up, that resilience, that challenge, that stretch, that rich environment for decision making is happening right in front of me, and there's no coaches there. I'm thinking, what have I learned about that? And I've learned about the fact that my bias was it was a place of recreation, but actually it's a real place of learning, where children and adults do real meaningful challenges that are the challenges that they see, they suit their level of performance. A great environment just to learn, ask questions, how children teach other children, how young adults teach others, teenagers teach other teenagers. Okay, so those are kind of my experiences of unconscious bias, how I've become a lot more informed by spending a lot of time being informed and getting information. So as we come to the last 5 minutes of the presentation for tonight, you can either put a question in the chat box or just take your microphone off, and then thanks Tyler for coming this evening. And please, if you've got any questions or anything that you'd like to ask about the presentation tonight, please feel free, or Avery, if you'd like to, anything from your perspective in terms of your role in coach development.
Yeah, thank you so much, Richard. I appreciate all of the wonderful examples and knowledge you brought. Definitely you have, I'm just going to stop presenting here. Okay, perfect. Definitely you've opened up my eyes to a little bit more understanding of my own practice as a coach. I think I've known about unconscious bias, and I've gone, okay, when I'm coaching, I'm like, okay, why do I feel like I connect with this athlete? And I'm like, oh, it's because they share that we share a similar experience or similar feelings, or And I think like I've known that, but I think you pointing out a couple other different like ways that, okay, yes, acknowledging that connect that okay, actually I can relate to you. Like one of the athletes I coached softball, and she said my trigger words where she said she didn't feel like she belonged. And I felt like that at one point as an athlete. And so I think knowing that, okay, like this is definitely bias, and knowing about it is great, but asking those questions, okay, how is it affecting feedback? How is it affecting playing time? I think that putting those direct questions out there for me to think about give me a different perspective. So I appreciate that.
No, thank you. And I also think, and again, it's just a phrase I learned is, sometimes they're telling you in their behaviors, but not telling you in words, and that can be, so it's how we build that rapport that allows them to tell us, or we take the time to find out what that's around. And that's certainly with young children, with teenage. In fact, I don't think there's a particular category where people, it can be any behavior, and that behavior can be non-engagement, not turning up, or really driven on the other perspective. Why are you, so those behaviors are really great indicators, which I kind of had to learn that. What are they telling you, but they're not telling you? And I just think that being recipients of bias makes you actually more driven to not be the person who is biased to others. I'm very mindful of people I coach now and teach, that of course we get a spectrum of abilities, but to let them know that I'm aware of all of the things they contribute. And it's not about the best, it's about things like effort. And effort isn't always measurable as grades, speeds, times. Resilience is a great one, coming back over and over again. And I think that we're in a position to reach out to a broader group of people, because people are much more appreciative. And I remember just the simple gestures of acknowledging effort takes away someone's feeling of us having bias towards high performers, rather than those who, we acknowledge effort, but we obviously acknowledge outcome. So I think those are critical, and thank you for your feedback on that, Avery.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. Yeah, I think that that's one of my things, is that I never felt seen as an athlete in some moments, and I never realized that could be potentially linked to bias, or as a way to go as a way to make people feel seen and not think that they are being that there's bias against them. So I think that connection is really cool, because that's one of my personal goals as a coach, is to make sure that effort is recognized, and go for athletes who like, I know I'm not going to get the playing time that like the best athlete's going to get, but what do they contribute to the success of the team, and acknowledging that not only to them but to the team, and that their contribution is valued is really important too. Oh, go for it, Kayla. Bye. Nice to have you on.
Thank you very much, Kayla.
Okay, I don't know if there's anybody else who has any. It is 12 o'clock, so I do know some people, or 12 o'clock my time. It's been an hour. So if anybody else has any questions or anything, feel free to ask them or put them in the chat. If not, we can bid our farewells, and we appreciate everybody who took the time to listen today.
Thanks, Avery. And again, feel free to share my email address if people want to kind of ask questions beyond the session today.
For sure. I will, I'll send, my goal is to send out an email with your contact information and the link to this video when it will be up on YouTube. So if anybody wants to rewatch it, and for your reference to Richard, if you wanted to share it with anybody, you'll have the link as well.
Thank you. And thanks for posting the Brené Brown link in the post as well.
No problem.
Okay, perfect.
Perfect.
Thank you,
Okay.
Avery. I'm sorry
Thank you
about
guys so much. Thank you.
Thank you,
Bye.
Rachel.
No problem.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm sorry about my camera's going to work now. I think that's maybe where that glitch where we got lost. Maybe because the camera was